Black Friday is a great thing, but it's also really dangerous.
I find it interesting that someone can struggle to save for a deposit or doesn't even think about property as an option because it seems so far out of reach. But that same person will drop $200 on a pair of shoes with a Black Friday sticker on it without even thinking or hesitating. And I'm wondering why.
The perception of live your life now because you don't know what's happening tomorrow influences what you buy.
Welcome back to Property Now.
Yes.
I'm your host, Michael Carboni. My friends call me Carbs. Today's guest, Nick Gray, is very different. This episode is going to be completely different. And I think when I introduce you properly, a lot of our viewers, a lot of our listeners will think, why is this a property podcast episode?
Yeah.
And I think it's there's a lot of property podcasts out there, a lot of property bros. I don't think the topic that we're going to dive into today has been sort of covered in a property space before. We're going to talk buyer emotion and your background, Nike, Westfields, Iconic, Sneaker Boy. I could probably keep going. You've got your own consultancy speaking company from a global retail perspective, IGU, global, I Got You. I would say you're probably very well known in the retail space, but a lot of the property people watching this seeing you for the first time, which is really exciting.
Yeah, amazing.
So why is a retail guy on a property podcast? And I think it's really important right now because I think buyer behavior is so important. If you're a potential buyer saving for a deposit, you're going to learn today what your buyer, you're going to maybe see some of your buyer behaviors, why you can't save, and maybe break some of those today after this conversation. So I think it's important from that perspective. If you're a sales agent or a developer, you're going to maybe understand your buyers a little bit more, and it's maybe going to change the way you market or sell to them. So I'm hoping we can do that from a retail lens. That's why you're here, because again, property industry, Nick, we move slow. It's a big industry, but people move slow in this industry.
Yeah.
I think retail moves a bit faster, and I think there's going to be some similarities there. So I'm really excited to have you here, mate.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I can't tell you how excited I was to be invited on. I think, when you talk about property, firstly, regardless of the business you're in, the approach has to be the same, right? And what I mean by that is that you're dealing with humans internally as a business, and you're dealing with humans externally as customers. And so if you don't understand how humans work, then what you're selling, the product you have, can be quite irrelevant. And what we do as a company, it translates into hospitality, tourism. My background is in retail, and it's a passion that I have. It's something I love, and 25 plus years means that fundamentally that's where we play. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't translate easily and well into other industries.
100%. What inspired me to chat to you today, very small thing that can be a much bigger thing, but there's a thing, I'm seeing a lot of ads at the moment. There's a thing, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's Black Friday. Right, you're seeing it everywhere, obviously.
It's new, yeah.
But look, Black Friday feels new, doesn't it? Like it came out of nowhere and all of a sudden it's this big thing. And I wonder, from a property perspective, there's probably two things. And the first one we can unpack a little bit more later, but I think Black Friday can affect property, but from the perspective of retail spending during this period. So at the moment, December's obviously a massive retail month for obvious reasons. November now is too because of Black Friday. All of those numbers equals inflation. RBA is speaking about it. Maybe there's a interest rate decision based on what happens in November, December. So that to me is really interesting. So that is where retail definitely can impact property in a funny kind of way. But where I want to start is, fundamentally, I find it interesting that someone can struggle to save for a deposit or doesn't even think about property as an option because it seems so far out of reach. But that same person will drop $200 on a pair of shoes with a Black Friday sticker on it without even thinking or hesitating. And I'm wondering why.
Okay. Right. Small question. Look, it's really interesting. Firstly, Black Friday is a great thing, but it's also really dangerous. One of the I write for Inside Retail here and in the US, and I just wrote an article sort of highlighting the fact that we're going into temptation season for retailers, and often Black Friday is not necessarily the right thing to do for brands and businesses, but they do it because everybody does it, and they're like, it's almost like this fear of missing out that they jump on the bandwagon as well and do it. But it's a dangerous one because it can actually change your brand and position in the marketplace. It's a lever that can be valuable to pull from inventory management, getting rid of stock, but fundamentally it's there to drive this dopamine release, right, for customers around perception of value, and I'm getting this at a discounted price. But when we talk about,
and I guess all of that shows in the numbers, right? So people need to feel good. So the small impulse or the small buys kind of means they get that dopamine hit, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think you were saying earlier as well that the numbers on like the spending habits on food, for example, are pretty consistent. Everyone needs to eat.
Yes.
You have a certain amount of meals a day, you've got a certain amount of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
And those numbers are typically consistent.
Yes.
But we've seen those drop a little bit.
Yeah.
So that means maybe that people are prepared to put less in the fridge so that they can have that.
Yeah, absolutely. What it's highlighting, and this is, off the back of COVID, is that we've been starved for emotion, starved for experience, right? So what it's meant is the priority for experience has started to take place of what we would typically be taking a responsible approach to. That experience economy, is going to be everything. And so what it means is dopamine's always been a really easy way to reward people, and it's very tempting to go down that road.
Yeah.
The other thing that we have to consider is that right now, they say it's something like 41% of all shopping for Christmas is fully completed by the beginning of November, right? So we're moving into a place now where it's not so much considered purchase. I need to get this for my mom and my partner and whatever. It's moving into finishing that process up and moving into the stocking filler mentality. Oh my God, I've got to get Michael a present.
Yeah, he's a couple of extras.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, but it draws this urgency around it all. The challenge that you have now is that is actually wearing off. When isn't a discount, for example, offered?
Yeah.
You see it on websites, and it's not as meaningful as it used to be. That process now, and so when you look at Black Friday from a brand perspective, you have to be very, very careful because, it's influencing the numbers and the revenue, but there's a cost to that on the other side.
Yeah, because if it's on sale, then people just buy when it's a sale.
Well, you're educating your consumer, but the biggest problem is that. If you're a brand and you're talking to a premium consumer, you've now got alignment with that. This is what they stand for. As soon as you discount, now you're talking to a different consumer that is motivated by value or price.
Yeah.
This top consumer that you really wanted to talk to and have as a target market, they move on because of the cognitive dissonance. You told me you were this, and now you're telling me you're this.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right? Yeah. So the impact, and then what happens with brands is they often have to continue to play that discount game. And where do you go to from there?
Yeah.
And when you have Sheins and Temus and whatever else that own that place, it's the pretty fast way to average.
Temu is interesting, hey, because, and this is way off topic, but their slogan is "Shop like a billionaire." And I actually love that because you can, with like $100, buy so much stuff on Temu.
Yeah.
And so you feel it's that emotional, like, I'm getting a lot of stuff. So you're feeling good about that.
Yeah.
And I wonder how much these dopamine on top of dopamine hit this whole short-term buyer mentality that we've kind of created, or that, future generations, that's what all they've known, how much they inadvertently put off bigger decisions like a house, or do they put it off because they think it can't be done, or because it doesn't give you the quick rush that you get from a new t-shirt?
Yeah, it really goes down to, part of it goes down to, well, there's two things that are happening, right? So, we mentioned before around COVID and the reality check on your mortality. What that means is that the perception of live your life now because you don't know what's happening tomorrow influences what you buy, right? The planning stage of me being around in 30 years has changed. And what that means then is that consumers are also thinking that housing is important and buying a house is important, but because they can't feel the negative impact of not having a house yet, it means, I'll take care of it later.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
It's kind of like when you're 20
Yeah.
and your doctor says, hey, if you keep eating this stuff,
Yeah.
chocolate, lollies,
Yeah.
anything with preservatives,
Yeah.
you're going to feel it later. And because you're going to feel it later, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to be good for you when you're 40 and 50.
Yeah.
And then you don't care. 20-year-old you doesn't care about 50-year-old you.
Right.
So you keep eating the bad stuff.
Yeah. And also we've created this narrative, social media is probably responsible more than anything that you will be a millionaire overnight. And that's what we showcase all the time is that from a stability perspective, you don't have to buy a house. You can get into crypto or, YouTuber or whatever else and you make millions of dollars. And it's like, so from a fundamental easy way to secure your financial future and freedom, it's not thought about that way, I don't think.
So people see like buying crypto, you could become a millionaire overnight, whereas buying properties it's a slow way to
social media has taught us and has made us addicted to speed, right? Addicted to efficiency, productivity. How do I get things faster, do things quicker? And so that mentality is the same way we think about our life. I want it now, I get it now, and younger consumers are into that more so than ever before. I want what I want, when I want it, and now,
Yeah. And I think there's almost a shift on if they can't get something, then it's not a concern right now. Let's worry about what I can do.
Yeah,
I
think it's changing though.
Tell me how. Yeah,
I think it's changing in that if for the last few years, attention has been around who's been able to be the noisiest, right, and who can be the most disruptive. That then has an impact. But I think 2025 especially, we're at a point now where attention doesn't measure allegiance and it doesn't have the same impact. So, I wrote an article about some of the changes that we're going to start seeing next year. And fundamentally, we are fatigued. This year has been about adapting to uncertainty and disruption and lots of change, and I think now as we move into 2026, we've built these behaviors and architectures in ourselves that means that they don't have the impact that they once did.
Yep.
That what we're actually looking for as we move forward into next year is more like emotional security, emotional safety. So it'll be interesting, but it's not going to be about who is aligning the best, like the mirror effect of what you believe in as a customer. It's going to be who can almost think about what that customer needs to feel as we move forward. Does that make sense?
It does. And
so if you look at like a Patagonia, for example, which is a great brand, they anchor to, so their emotional default might be culture, right? And what they do is they focus on that. So they're buying alignment by having the same values, beliefs, behaviors that their customer has. And they echo that through physical, online moments of activation that anchor back to their greater purpose as a brand, right? So currently we look at that as alignment. Yeah, they believe in the same thing that we do. But as they move forward into next year, that's not going to resonate like it once did because there's so much of that. Brands telling you, businesses telling you, here's what we believe in. Is it the same as you? And it's like, that doesn't really have the authenticity that it once had. And so, Patagonia is still a great example. That transparency that they're providing, which is coming from more vulnerability in saying, here's what we're doing, but then leading messages, we're not sustainable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we've seen a whole lot of brands say, we are sustainable. And it's like...
And they might not always be.
Well, really, if you want to be sustainable, don't do anything.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So it's actually not true. So Patagonia coming out and say, we are not sustainable, but here's what we're doing to try and improve the situation and playground that we're in. That's honesty, right? That's actually getting behind the message and moving it, or the meaning, and moving it to memory.
Yeah. And I think building trust is a big thing, right? If you can start to have those conversations, and every age group demographic might be different as well in terms of what they want and what they believe and what they need. But that trust building exercise, I know if you're looking at a Black Friday scenario, I think a lot of maybe agents, real estate agents, might have that Black Friday mentality, not in terms of discounting, unfortunately, but in terms of like lead, sale. How do I convert this lead? As opposed to how do I nurture this conversation? How do I educate this potential buyer? How do I build trust so that they are comfortable to make one of the biggest transactions of their life with me?
Yes. It's an interesting one. It's something I talk about a lot because we talk about trust all the time. So many businesses, so many sectors, trust is really important. We are the trusted partner, et cetera, et cetera. And yet most don't really realize how trust is built, right? So in business, regardless of what you're in, there's two camps. You're either a cognitive default, meaning that you're making an automatic decision, right? So where do I get my shopping from? I go to Woolworths or Coles. Where do I get my sports product? Rebel Sport. It's a really short equation that takes place in your head. JB Hi-Fi home tech product, and a really hard camp to stay in, right? But if you're not in that camp, then you're in the emotional camp. And the emotional camp is where customers are buying from you or being involved with you because of a feeling or emotion that's attached to that interaction. Okay, so if you're in the emotional default camp, which most are, there's kind of 4 buckets that fall in that camp. Now, I would be bold enough to say if you are not clear on that emotional default and understand the feeling you're selling, not the product, your time's going to be very limited. And we're still talking about trust here. I know I'm doing it in a really roundabout way.
No, that's fine.
But so you look at the 4 buckets are expertise, entertainment, culture, and design, fundamentally, right? So if you look at what you're doing, you're in property and so forth, but you actually lean into, what do you lean into? You lean into design and expertise, right? So design being, you're taking something that you're not reinventing the wheel. Buying houses has been around for a long time, but you're reinterpreting how that's done, right? But then also you lean into expertise, and expertise is around authority and having the most information around what it is that you do, right? So like Dyson is a great example of design. Dyson don't reinvent the wheel, but they play in areas and reinterpret them to change the function and interpretation of it. So many people have a Dyson vacuum. Vacuums have been around for many, many years, but they've reinterpreted that, which then anchors to a reward.
Yeah.
So understanding your emotional default and then the feeling that you're selling, for them, it's like when you have a Dyson, you can feel it sucking on the floor. You can see it collecting dust. That leans into reward. And reward is that sense of winning and progression in your life from achieving vacuuming, right? So that's the feeling that is anchored to the design. And they do that every single time, right? So going back to trust now, trust is actually built on emotion, right? Humans are hardwired to trust. What we're looking for is like or dislike trust. Right? There's people that that you don't like, that you trust, but you trust them in a different way. You might trust them to say something inappropriate in front of your children, or trust them to be late. But that is what we're looking for. That's why
a negative trust, yeah.
It's really important too, right? Because it's funny. We watched the thing last night, and it was like, oh, I can't believe I trusted him. that's where that comes from, is that we are constantly hardwired to look for trust. And so the dislike trust for a brand and business is just as important as the like. And what the dislike trust does is it actually moves the like trust up into love. But it comes from consistency.
Yeah. It's almost like, I think about, you mentioned the shopping scenario, Coles or Woolies, for example.
Yep.
Now, typically, my decision on Coles versus Woolies will depend on what is closest to the house that I live in.
Right.
But if I'm pushing the trolley through the aisles, I bypass the meat aisle because I buy my meat from the local butcher where I know the quality is going to be great.
Right.
So that's the emotion side versus the cognitive side.
Yeah,
and
totally.
you can play in both areas, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, you can. So what happens is, going back to this trust, the best way to describe it is like, if I want you to come out to dinner with me,
Yeah.
I'm going to anchor to an emotion. I'm going to say, it's going to be amazing. We're going to this restaurant. This person's going to be there. I'm paying. And what you're doing is you're building a cognitive narrative anchored back to an emotion. That's either going to say, yes, I'm going, or that's not for me. Right. And so the message is the persuader to move you into, move me in time to building a reputation.
Yep.
Which reputation comes from repetition, right? And then it moves you from being a persuader to an influencer. And that's the same thing that happens in business. So if you think about it from Coles, it's the consistency in the way that it works, that you know how it works every single time, built that cognitive narrative. And now when something happens in your life around, I need groceries, they're the first person you think of.
Yeah.
And that's influence.
Yeah.
Influence is not influencer on social media. They're persuaders. They're trying to convert. Persuasion actually comes from, this has happened in my life, and they're the first. Like for me, I want to be that, but for retail.
Yeah.
When something happens in retail, I wonder what Nick thinks about that.
Yeah, of course. And I guess that's the same with us with Coposit, right? We want to be, to me, there's a generation. Oh, look, Coposit really is for everyone, and we can talk about demographics a bit later as well too.
Yeah.
By age group. But really, we started because we wanted to be a voice for a younger generation who didn't think property is possible or don't think property is possible. And we're here to tell them that it is, and this is why, and this is how.
Yes.
And we've been around for 5 years, and we're only starting to build that rapport and show that voice by what we're doing. And we're not selling. We don't sell.
Yeah.
We're not selling.
Yeah.
We're just we're maybe educating, maybe even entertaining in some ways as well.
So what you're doing really well, right? And having known you since the beginning, is the consistency in that message anchored back to what you do. And it's the consistency that actually builds the trust.
Yeah.
Right. And it's earned. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It is earned. And this is why, going back to Black Friday, the cognitive dissonance is no different to what happens in a relationship. You think you know somebody because they turn up the same way every single time and become famous for behavior. And then when they show you the opposite, what it does is it puts doubt in your mind, no different to a relationship. And if you have doubt in your relationship, it impacts trust.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to repair. So the consistency in building trust, it comes from almost saying, here's what we aren't, so that you can show what you are.
Yeah. It almost flips too. We talked about urgency from a buyer side. There's urgency from a seller's side as well. So at the moment in the property space, there's a lot of data flying around about it takes 22 months. And I've said this on the podcast many times, but I'll keep repeating
Yeah, no, I never heard it. So it's
it
great.
takes 22 months for a buyer to make a home buying decision. To decide. So from the moment where they're thinking about moving or buying to actually making that decision, it's 22 months.
Okay, so let's think about that for a second, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of information that needs to, it's a considered purchase.
Correct.
Right? So it's not your go to the supermarket purchase where you don't have to think.
Yeah.
It's considered. There's things you need to weigh up, and it's a big consideration. I think that, so what comes from that is information, jargon, complexity that actually confuses the ease of path to purchase.
Yeah.
And you're fighting that against a world now where we don't trust. So we're living in a world now where the things we used to use to make decisions in our lives has changed.
Yep.
You know, we don't trust religion. We don't trust politicians. We don't trust the police force. You know, we don't even trust our local mechanic anymore. You know, does he really know what I need, or is he trying to sell me something, right? And so our bubble has got really, really small, and it's only getting worse as we move into AI and technology. And it's our close friends and family. Hey, Michael, do you know a good mechanic I can use? And if you've had a good experience with somebody, you're going to go, here's the mechanic. It was amazing, right? Yeah. So let's go back to the housing situation. And the same thing happens. Is it the ease in which that path to purchase, it's longer, but the consistency in the emotional delivery has to be ongoing.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what I think is the biggest challenge, because it's not an overnight decision or even a week decision.
Yeah.
So you got to provide the information, but anchor it back to the emotion that they're looking for, the feeling that they're looking for, which does change depending on buyer every single time.
And it is hard in a world where our metrics are measured on numbers. How many sales did we make this month? And
always.
And then when you layer that on top of it takes someone 22 months to make a decision, are you prepared to be nurturing people from 2 years ago to make sure that the numbers in the month that you're analyzing in 2 years' time are good? Like how prepared are you to do that? And I think that's really important. And that's why I guess relationship-wise, trust-wise, education-wise, you always need to be on no matter what.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. You've mentioned different types of buyers. I've read a few times in a few of your articles and on some of your LinkedIn posts as well, you talk about this RICE, R-I-C-E.
Yeah.
Can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's fundamental instinctual inherent requirements for humans, right? And these RICE are the motivations that we use when we make buying decisions and other decisions in our life, right? So it's a framework that we use that just allows us to get clarity on what are the motivations, beliefs, desires that customers have, knowing that this was the right way to reward them, right? So in retail, we're always guilty. So RICE, firstly, stands for reward, ideology, coercion, ego, right? The other one that's coming into it is feeling, where people are buying. Black Friday is a great example, buying simply to feel something.
Is feeling a part of emotion?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
The Dyson example I gave before, that's a feeling. Of that's true reward. In retail, we think reward is discount, gift with purchase, loyalty programs. No, those are dopamine hits. True reward comes from, like Dyson, that feeling of winning, progressing and moving forward in your life.
You described it as achieving vacuuming. I've never heard vacuuming described as an achievement. But no, it makes sense when you describe it this way.
Totally. And then you go back to it. Right? If you've tried a Dyson, for example, you're converted.
My wife had a car accident probably about 6 months ago.
Wow.
Totally fine.
Good.
She's no problems at all. But the car was a write-off. Airbags went off, baby in the back, she ran around, baby unharmed, my 1-year-old. Everyone was safe, but the car was finished. Car was done.
Wow.
Shout out to Volkswagen. She had a Tiguan. I said, anyway, car written off. We need a new car. I said, what do you want? She goes, I want a Volkswagen Tiguan. I need the same car because I feel safe in it. Like that happened. We had this accident. Everything went off, but Stella and I walked out completely unharmed. That's emotion, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So let's come back to that.
Yeah.
So RICE stands for reward, which is winning, progressing, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Ideology is your values, beliefs, behaviors, the principles you live by, the beliefs that you have in the way you live your life. Coercion is literally the opposite of inspiration, right? Coercion is an interesting one because it can be done ethically and not ethically. But basically coercion is when a customer is buying something to alleviate a negative feeling that they're having, right? So you see it with makeup. You see it with, you're putting on weight, here, buy this milkshake. That's coercion. And it can be done ethically. If you're solving a problem for a customer, then great. But if you're leaning into making them feel guilty or bad about themselves, then that's not right.
That's good.
And then there's ego, right? And ego is, there's nothing wrong with ego. Ego is literally how you think the rest of the world sees you, right? Ego is when you look in the mirror and go, killer, right? Yeah. But it's also when you look in the mirror and you go, oh my God, I've put on so much weight.
Yeah.
It's just how you think the rest of the world is seeing you. And so what we do is we buy things that help us share our identity in the world that we live in, right? Because the fundamental around that is that we have 3 personas as a person. So you have your public persona, which is ego. How I want, I wear a beanie and always wear black because this is what I want you to remember and know about me, right? And the things we buy, jewelry, certain appliances, the types of car, they all send a message about here's what I believe in. And then you have your private persona, and your private persona is things that, my partner will know about me that the rest of the world doesn't. And then your silent persona, which are things that nobody else knows about. So when we think about buying a house, for example, there's 2 that you're leaning into. You're leaning into public persona and you're leaning into private persona, right? There's things that a house needs to deliver to me on an emotional level when I'm living in it and nobody else sees me.
Yep.
But then there's also the perception that allows me to have in the world around me from a public perspective as well. So, do you know what the most powerful one is?
No, tell me.
The most powerful of the levers is ideology.
Okay.
And that's the values, beliefs, behaviors that you have as a brand or business that align to your target market. Patagonia that we spoke about earlier, great example. They lean into ideology, right? And so by getting that clarity of what they're looking for through those 4 things means that you can be authentic in the way you deliver it. And the problem is now, certainly like Gen Z, they have become so savvy in seeing through inauthenticity.
Yeah.
They sniff a sales pitch out like there's no tomorrow.
100%.
Right? Because they're living all their time on social media and online and stuff. They see right through it.
Gen Alpha is going to be even better at that.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be really interesting in, they're not going to know anything else other than AI, but they will build identity through creation online.
I'm chatting to my wife. She goes, how are we going to protect our kids from AI? How are we going to protect them? That's the question she asked. I said, babe, the way like my dad asked me how to turn his computer on and set up his email like 15 years ago, that's going to be our kids. They're going to, like, you're going to see a video and not know what it is. They're going to know in the first second, this is AI. This isn't real. They're going to know because they're growing up in it. They're living in it.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Maybe I should start with I use AI every day, right? I'm not anti-AI.
Yep, same.
At all. I love technology.
Yep.
And the ability to make things faster, more efficient and productive in a business is amplified.
It's critical
now, like never before. I think we're leaning too heavily into the approach to AI and technology, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, conversion and how quickly can I get things done to improve the business, perhaps. But we're actually seeing there's a lot of dangers with AI as well. There's the terminology now called AI psychosis, which is real. It's a medical term. And we have to understand that AI, when we think about it from like our LLM, so your ChatGPTs and Geminis, they are designed to build trust. So they are designed to make your thinking be validated. Oh, it's good that you thought of that. Great catch on.
Yeah.
They literally almost flirt with you and validating your thinking about things the right way.
Yep.
That's why when they hallucinate, it's still delivered with a tone of voice of authority that you can buy into. And so what it does is it makes leaders lean into, I already know what's going on, right? But to understand how AI really works, we have to understand how we learn as humans, right? And so there's kind of 3 steps that you go through to understand information. And, my generation, we were books to get our information, and then Google, so the internet, and now AI. But what happens is you take that information as step 1, and then what you do is you go through a process that allows you to unpack it, allow you to compare it. It takes effort, right? And you give it structure, which then means that it becomes what's called a schema. And it's when it becomes a schema from the work that you've done in learning and unpacking it all, the effort, it anchors to memory, and it anchors to, that's how you become an expert in it. So what AI does is it takes the information and it bypasses the effort and takes you to the answer. And so what it means is there's a cognitive bypass straight through the answer. And it actually means that it creates the illusion of learning, but you're actually not learning because you haven't gone through the process.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's a really dangerous space because, especially in business, it's easier, it's less messy.
If you're lazy with it, there's problems. But if you interrogate it, question it
with critical thinking.
You have to question it, right? But I still think we're just scratching the surface. I mean, if you look at every major technological moment in history, let's just go back to one of the most recent ones, which is the internet. If you looked at the internet on day one, you're looking at it from the lens of what we already have.
Yeah.
So you can't see beyond, the internet being maybe a streaming service similar to TV or like radio or something like that. We didn't know the potential for SaaS, for online shopping.
Yep.
We didn't know the potential for Google search. We didn't know that existed. It wasn't until like Web 2.0 that some of these things started to happen.
Yes.
We're still in that early stage where we're thinking about it from our current lens, so we don't know where it's going to be. But we're way off topic, which is totally fine.
But just touching on that really quickly, that is what worries me, because we're like, it's like an arms race right now for who's adding, who's not getting AI and adding technology to their business without really fully understanding the impact of it. And if we look at past history with .com and the collapse of that, the same thing could happen with AI.
Well, I see it in the property space, and you might have a retail example as well, but I'm seeing one thing that happened very quickly and then sort of died off a little bit. Probably about 6 months ago, I started hearing a lot of people in industry saying, oh yeah, we need AI can like handle our leads. AI can actually handle the phone call, and there'll be prompts and responses, and the buyer can talk to an AI bot before they speak to a real person.
Yeah.
And what I think a lot of people have discovered very quickly is people want to speak to people when they're making the biggest buying decision of their life. They don't want to speak to a robot. So that's not the place for AI in this scenario.
Totally agree. There's right and left side of the brain, right? So AI is very good at taking unstructured data and structuring it, which is amazing. So as a leader, you don't need to run all the reports and have make a decision on the direction of a business anymore, like you once did. Right? You can have one true source of information that comes to life very quickly, very easily. And that's why your competitive advantage now is not the technology, because it's not who can afford to put this technology in their business to make themselves more efficient. That's really kind of level set. Small businesses to large businesses have those same competitive advantages. So the competitive advantage now is who can connect the best, and understanding that, like what I said before, we're making decisions with emotion, justifying with logic later, is what is going to be the difference between winning and losing as we move forward.
It goes back to your ideology, the I in Rice. People and ideology, they expect a certain level as a baseline.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you got to have that. It's probably the same with AI. It's a good transition, right? The AI, you expect a level of...
It is the expectation. It can't be a brag anymore, right?
So going back to Rice then, how can we implement Rice into this 22-month property decision framework?
Well, I think it's really interesting because the clarity, the way consumers work with brands and businesses is no different to how you and I first worked, right? It's that gut feeling that says, is this somebody I want to share information with? Is it somebody I trust? So the clarity and understanding yourself as a business first on an emotional level, almost thinking about it like humanizing your business, means that you're going to be much more meaningful when you meet a target audience.
Yep.
And that 22-month process, it has to be consistent simply because if it's not, you're implementing doubt and that impacts trust, right?
Even after the sale. Because if I make the sale and then all of a sudden I'm not the guy that I was before I was selling to you, now that you've done it, I'm like, okay, done. I don't have to worry about you anymore. That affects that person telling their friends about what a great experience they had with me.
Totally.
Right. So I might be losing on that end.
Yeah.
So you gotta be real.
They're your greatest ambassadors now, right? They're one of your strongest marketing tools is the experience that they've had, which they will share with others. So consistency for me is going to be everything, but also having clarity around who it is that you're going after, your target market, because there is property that will flex on. So let me think about this a little bit different. At Sneaker Boy, which was in the luxury space, we weren't selling luxury brands and footwear. We were selling status and securing credibility for these people amongst their peers, leaning into ego. We knew that if we could lean into that, selling that emotion, that the ability or opportunity for them to spend more would take place over justifying it with logic. Luxury does this really well. They stay well away from price, knowing if they're validating the status and validating the feeling you're looking for, the price of it is going to be irrelevant. Buy with emotion, justify with logic. And the same will happen in property. We've seen it. If it meets the emotional needs, and as we move into next year, those emotional needs are going to be around feeling safe and confident from what that provides me emotionally.
And is each cohort different? And what I mean by that is, if I'm selling a property type that is for maybe a downsizer sort of audience, I'm looking at baby boomers. They're happy to find some equity and have maybe a bit more safety in a walk-up apartment versus a house. They might have less upkeep, and obviously the equity component as well, versus maybe a millennial who not too long ago it felt like us millennials were the young kids on the block disrupting and making a difference, but now we have families and we want backyards and stuff, so our decision might be different. How do you unpack each generation?
Look, it is hard, right? Because within each generation there are things that become more important and less important depending on the experiences that you've had in life, right? We saw it in work after COVID. Some people were reluctant to go back into the office. Working from home became a much more digestible environment. But even how you're shaping success in life was had changed. People moving out of the city going, you know what, it's just not worth it anymore for me. I want to go and live a life that I will measure experience as success and not what my job title is or how much I'm earning. The same thing fundamentally takes place with generation. You spoke about millennials. If millennials is your target audience, they are looking for reassurance right now. They're the ones that have kind of experienced the most around change and everything. They know that shiny thing doesn't mean that it's going to be the best. And so what we have to provide them is strengthening that reassurance. And for them, that reassurance is coming from the extra little phone call, the human contact and touch point. We spoke about the human trust that is built from dealing with another human. That actually comes from the nuances. The pause that I've just put in there is what shapes that trust. That's really important to them. The seamless checkout on a digital platform is really not important to a baby boomer. Millennials are interesting because they're fundamentally tired. They're so fatigued because we're just exhausted them. So they're not looking for more noise, attention. They're actually wanting to have a much more, in the next generation is quite similar, a place to feel calm, and so the problem that we have is that we shape our target audience from demographic, and demographic's important because it tells us so much. Age group, location, job, income. Rachel's 23, just left home, etc., etc. But what you're trying to get into is the psychometrics. And the psychometrics are what are their values, beliefs, behaviors, motivations, and how they measure success. Yeah. And once you can get clarity on that, saying, here's what we stand for, believe in, the way we do business, you can start really bringing that to life from what are the ways that we need to reward our customer in the right way to anchor against them.
There's so much there, and we could go on for ages, and I'm conscious of time obviously as well.
Sure.
But I want to bring that. Can we bring that thinking straight to property? If I say I'm in how do I relate that straight back to property right now? That emotion, that thinking, that feeling. How can I do that?
Yeah, it's a funny one because I think fundamentally with property, and it's something you guys are doing already, is I think the choreography of property and approach to property has to change. And think about it from making it really easy to just continually anchor, as opposed to here's all the information you have to digest, which is creating so much confusion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
There's good brands that do that in retail, where it's a very simple approach to the retail. Often now take an approach of forget where they're buying, just make sure they can, right? So it's not about conversion. It's about meeting the customer regardless of where they're at, whether it's the first time they've met you, looking for inspiration or education, ready to purchase first or third time they've done it.
Yep.
So the role of your store, for example, is to be able to do all of that. So therefore, it becomes your most manageable, tangible, measurable marketing tool, and you can still sell. And that's the shift I think that kind of has to take place within property as well.
What I'm hearing too is maybe differentiation. If you look at, especially in the off the plan space, if I scroll through my Instagram feed, I get a lot of property ads because of my algorithm, the industry I'm in.
Yes.
If you cover the logo of the developer, they're all pretty much the same.
Totally agree. Yeah. It's one of the things we see often with content creation right now is it's very anchored to tone, not truth.
Yeah.
So the fonts are good, the music is great, it all comes together in the right way. You probably like it, you may even save it, but you move on from it really quickly. Yeah. And that's when you look at how that is measured as success, it's actually an illusion.
Yeah.
Because it's just vanity likes, right? It actually doesn't move the dial connection. And so we're moving away from meaning and anchoring now to memory.
But how does a buyer differentiate all 10? They might have 10 that are all the same. How do they decide? And that could be why it takes 22 months to make a buying decision, because there's more questions than answers.
Yeah, I think often the approach from a property perspective or a real estate company is that we can be everything to everybody. And you really can't. As soon as you try to talk to everybody, you're actually not talking to anyone.
Yep.
So you have to almost go out and have an opinion. It's something you guys do really well.
Thank you.
And it's important because if you have an opinion, you build the like or dislike trust.
Yeah.
It literally says, these guys aren't for us. Actually, that's something that makes sense to me.
Well, you can try and win over everyone and win over no one.
Yeah.
Or you can have an opinion and win over 50%, and the other 50% might not like you, but who cares?
There was a great campaign that Nike did with American football player Kaepernick.
Mm-hmm.
And he dropped to one knee during Black Lives Matter. You probably remember it.
Yeah.
Now everybody, there was a huge uproar, right? And get him out of the NFL, and he's not American, all this sort of stuff. Nike took him on at that point while everybody else was dropping him. And the slogan, if I'm right, was stand for something and not everyone will stand with you. Stand for nothing and you'll stand alone, right? Now, there was a huge uproar with Nike consumers, but sales increased like 30% first month, 80% from a yearly perspective. And all it did is it sharpened their community. Those people that were burning their Nikes and, F Nike and all this, that's not their target market in the first place. But everyone believed that, who believed in what they did, moved from like to love. Yeah. That's why it's so important.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's where we ended, because that's perfect. And thanks, Nick, because we could actually have this conversation over and over again.
Yeah.
And it would be different every time. And I've had to think more in this episode as a host than I have before, because there's just so much. It was such a different topic to unpack, and I think hugely relevant. So I appreciate your time, mate. Do you want to shout out yourself, IGU? Where can people find you? How can they follow you? If they wanted you to come in for a speaking gig, I'm sure you might have a few of those as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is I'm on LinkedIn. IGU Global. We have our website. We work with everyone. My background is 8.5 years at Adidas and 10 years at Nike, and we work with some pretty diverse businesses. Always open to a discussion and happy to help.
Thanks for your time, mate.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great. Thanks, mate.
This is Jason He, the sexiest voice in property, here to tell you that the Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.